This is your ZNS News Update live at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, Bahamas. I'm Jiminita Swain. We're now about to hear from Prime Minister Dr. the Most Honorable Hubert Minnis on the latest as it relates to COVID-19. We now turn it over to a live press conference that's about to take place at the office of the Prime Minister. Now, again, the Prime Minister is about to address the nation on COVID-19. The latest, so far we know as of yesterday, there were 3 confirmed cases, but he will advise us as he prepares to address the nation. His cabinet colleagues are in place at the office of the Prime Minister, and for now we are going to throw it to those at the office of the Prime Minister as we all wait to hear what is the latest developments. They are standing by and are about to await the arrival of the Prime Minister. As you can see on screen, we have the Minister of Health, we have the former CMO, that's the former Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Dal Regis. We have the Attorney General, the Honorable Carl Bethel. We have also in place the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Pearl Macmillan, and the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Del Brennan. Everyone is standing in place waiting to hear from Prime Minister the Most Honorable Hubert Minnis, who is now approaching the podium. We now turn it over to that press conference.
Everyone be seated, please. Thank you. And cable and stand by to roll. And one.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You would note that I have accompanying me here this evening my Minister of Health, my Attorney General, Chief Medical Officer, Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Dal Regis, who's consultant, and of course Dr. Nakia Forbes, who's in charge of infectious disease unit. Today, I am announcing an emergency order which gives the government of the Bahamas the authority to use temporary but necessary measures in the country's fight against COVID-19. Many similar measures are being used around the world to fight this threat to lives and the social and economic well-being of citizens. This is a global fight, and we must be prepared for battle. We must and will win this fight here at home. I assure you of this as Prime Minister and as a medical doctor. These are very strong measures that are intended to save lives, to protect health, and to aggressively attack the spread of COVID-19. And one of these measures is a curfew. A curfew is hereby imposed, extending each night from 9 p.m. to 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. with such exception as may approved by the Commissioner of Police. This curfew would commence at 9 p.m. tomorrow. And already the Commissioner of Police has exempted those trucks and personnel, tankers and vehicles that are responsible or working with our gas stations and gas facilities. We will end the curfew after consultation with medical personnel. I stress that these are temporary measures. It is critical that we work together to fight this threat. We can only win this battle together. All of us must play our role in protecting our health and the health of our families and loved ones, and the health of others, especially older individuals and others vulnerable to this virus. The measures to be announced are essential in addressing the spread of this highly contagious virus. Yesterday, along with members of the Cabinet, including the Minister of Health, I toured healthcare facilities in New Providence that will be used to assess and treat COVID-19 positive patients. We have made significant strides in the preparedness measures the government has put in place to deal with this coronavirus. The Doctors Hospital facility on Blake Road has been prepared and is ready to accept COVID-19 patients who require treatment. There are some who may be concerned what would happen if a patient is COVID positive and on dialysis. I can assure you that such facility has dialysis machine and equipment in place should the need arise. The facility and the perimeter will be secured by our own Defense Force personnel. To boost frontline staff, to address the COVID-19 threat, nurses who have completed their training and successfully completed their examinations will be appointed effective immediately. I want to reassure Bahamians and residents that our food and medical supplies, as well as stocks, are well stocked, and there is absolutely no need for panic buying or hoarding. Fuel supplies are very strong in our country. And several hours ago, I met with the petroleum dealers and have been reassured that we are well stocked, and therefore there's no need for long lines for fuels. Propane gas is well stocked as well. Our ports will remain open for freight and cargo. Our airports will remain open. However, the government of the Bahamas strongly discourages non-essential domestic and international travel. Social distancing has been shown to slow the spread of this COVID-19 disease. To encourage social distancing, businesses are being strongly urged to operate with essential staff only and to allow those who can work remotely from their homes. Members of the public service shall work from home as may be authorized by the Permanent Secretary, maintaining only essential staff for the performance of essential functions while adhering at all times to social distancing. As announced by the Minister of Finance in the House of Assembly yesterday, the government has requested the Water and Sewage Corporation to reconnect all disconnected services for residential customers to ensure personal hygiene is not compromised. The government has also directed Water and Sewage and recommended to BPL to defer payment of bills for an initial period of 3 months for residential customers who are diagnosed with the virus, who are in quarantine, or who have been laid off. The government will cover the cost of those utility bills, as this is an unprecedented situation facing our nation. The regulations in the proclamation of the emergency orders criminalize the deliberate creation of fake news for the purpose of inciting public fear and panic. This is an important and necessary provision. Democratic countries around the world are having difficulties with this issue. Some individuals are deliberately circulating lies and false information to cause panic, unrest, violence, and confusion. In some countries, the creation of malicious fake news has led to killings by those who incited fear and panic. In our democracy, freedom of speech has always come with responsibilities and with limits. For example, if by your words you threaten to kill someone, that is a crime in the Bahamas. Uttering threats of death is illegal. If by your words you threaten to attack or injure someone, that too is a crime in the Bahamas. Uttering threats of harm is also illegal. We must be responsible with what we say. There is now circulating through social media a fake emergency order that was not issued by the government of the Bahamas. This was an intentional and malicious attack that could cause panic and harm. Just as we are fighting a virus that can cause harm, we must address a contagion of fear and panic that can cause harm to others. I plead with Bahamians to play their role to stop the spread of COVID-19 and to stop the spread of malicious and fake news. We all have a role to play in this. Freedom of speech remains with these regulations. What has been outlawed is the deliberate creation of lies and false information designed to cause harm to others. There's been a problem in the Bahamas with the creation and spread of malicious fake news for some time. We face a crisis not seen in the lifetime of most Bahamians. As a country, as a people of goodwill, we collectively cannot allow devious individuals to make this crisis worse and to harm others. This crisis is developing daily, and the government of the Bahamas will make adjustments as necessary in the best interests of the public health and safety of the Bahamian people and residents of our Bahamas. The government will continue to provide you with regular updates. I thank all of those in the front line of this battle for their courage, for their compassion, and dedication to the health, security, and well-being of Bahamians and residents. The orders that I am about to announce are very strong, but they will save lives, which is my greatest responsibility as Prime Minister. I will just briefly refer to some remarks of the orders, and the Attorney General is here, and he can expound and answer any questions that you, members of the press, may ask. This order will come into force at 9 a.m. tomorrow, March 20th, 2020, and will expire at 9 a.m. on the 31st of March of this year. A curfew will be put in effect at 9 p.m. tomorrow and will continue until 5 a.m. the following day. And this curfew will remain in effect as the order dictated. Some of the imposition of orders: for every island and key of the Commonwealth of Bahamas, for a period of 11 days commencing tomorrow, the 20th, all establishments, institutions, businesses, offices, stores, and organizations shall suspend operations to the general public, except for the following: wholesale or retail grocery stores and farmers market from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m., except doctors' offices, hospitals, or medical facilities. Pharmacies from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Gas stations from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. And as I've stated, it was essential to exempt trucks, personnel, and vehicles from this curfew so as to allow our fuel and personnel to be transported properly to the proper facilities. Medical supplies establishment also exempted are hotels, banks from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., commercial ports and related businesses from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Also exempted are airports, laundromats and wash houses for hygienic purposes from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Drive-through or takeaway food vendors from 6 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Construction companies carrying out any construction work from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Such other businesses or undertakings as may be specifically exempted in writing by the competent authority. That means that there may be special circumstances where individuals or businesses can be exempted and can be opened as directed by the competent authority, in this case, the Prime Minister. Every person in such establishment or businesses must distance themselves from other persons at a minimum of 3 to 6 feet from any other such persons. No person shall host or attend 1. A private party, which includes any person from outside of the immediate household of the house occupant. A recreational or competitive sporting event. A wedding which hosts 10 or more persons other than the bride, bridegroom, official witnesses, and the marriage officer. A banquet, ball, or reception. Any social event. A funeral, except 10 members of the immediate family and at least 1 officiant and essential mortuary staff, or a meeting of a fraternity society, private or social club, or civic association or organization. No person shall offer for hire or seek to travel on any public bus transportation, mail boat, sailing inter-island except for transport or freight, or inter-island private commercial sea transport that is non-essential, provided that the competent authority may vary any such requirement above. No person shall visit any place of quarantine or isolation station. No person shall be permitted to visit any detainee in a correctional facility, nor more than one person at any time shall visit a patient in a hospital or residential care establishment or facility. Subject to the provision of this order, every person shall remain in the confines of their dwelling home, inclusive of their yard space. I hereby further order that nothing in this order shall affect the function of essential officers of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, Fire Services, the Department of Correctional Services, the National Insurance Board, the Department of Social Services, the Department of Environmental Health Services, the sanitational workers and staff within any hospital or health care or medical facilities. Affect the function by essential officers of any water, electricity, or other sector encompassing the provision of electronic communications, including print and electronic media. Nothing in this order shall prohibit religious or educational instruction, worship, or other activity by electronic or virtual means. Nothing will prohibit individual attendance at a church for private individual prayer while maintaining social distances. Subject to paragraph 3(1) herein, all other establishments, institutions, businesses, or offices, inclusive of public service, as may be authorized by the respective permanent secretary, shall work from home, and such establishments, institutions, businesses, or offices shall maintain only essential staff for the performance of core function while adhering at all times to social distancing as prescribed above. Any person, company, or organization who contravene any order given here is liable upon summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $10,000 or to a term of imprisonment not exceeding 18 months or both. The police, and I've had a meeting this morning with both the police and defense force, and both have been advised of this curfew, and I can assure you that they are ready and have already commenced mobilizing their team. The police and defense force have been advised that should they find themselves in a staff situation, they are authorized for all those individuals who are on vacation, who have been retired and can perform their duties, they can immediately report for duties, as this is an urgent situation. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? I have here the technical team to answer your medical questions, and I have here the Attorney General to answer your legal questions.
Hi there, Mr. Prime Minister. Jasper Ward of the Nassau Guardian. Two questions. Does this order, this curfew, apply to liquor stores and number web shops? And has this order been translated into Creole for our Haitian community?
I'd have the Attorney General answer all here.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and good afternoon to everybody present. Yes, the order applies to gaming houses and to liquor stores. And as with all major proclamations, we will have it translated into Creole for the Haitian community. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, can we get just a little bit of further definition or clarification on what complying, Rashad ruled from the Tribune, on what complying with the curfew would look like? Is it the case that people should be in their homes, not outside buildings, not in cars? Just
persons should be in their homes. If their home is affixed to the soil or in some manner, they may go in the immediate area around in their yard, but not if it's an open yard over to someone else's home, and not to mingle with any occupant of any other house. If it's an enclosed yard, well, of course, it's an enclosed yard. Okay.
And the question for the medical professionals as well. What exactly would you need to see happen over the next 11 or so days to not recommend an extension of these orders?
So what we would need to see is the transmission that we are trying to prevent has not occurred. We will be monitoring as we continue to do our testing and contact tracing, the number of cases we're getting. Certainly, if it is that we can see that we are not having ongoing transmission of the virus, then we would be in a position to make the recommendation toward lifting the curfew.
Jasper Ward again, Mr. Prime Minister.
Jasper, I know you love me.
You know, Bahamian things, right? So my question is, the U.S. has seen their 10,000th case of COVID-19, and you've clearly declared war on COVID-19. Why not close our borders to the U.S.? Why not add them to our restricted travel?
I think you'd note that the airline industry are decreasing their flights throughout the world. And as the airline industry continued to decrease, then obviously we would not even have to answer that question. The U.S. is closing their own borders. But remember, we are an archipelago of islands. We have not just New Providence, but we have other Bahamian islands. And those islands, we must have our airports open so that we can deal with those islands appropriately.
Prime Minister Jerome Sawyer from RTV. Yesterday, in a contribution to the House of Assembly, you expressed your disdain over the fact that information had been leaked about the order. Today, you stand in front of us with, as you describe, a fake news emergency order that's now being circulated. How concerned are you that this sensitive information continues to be leaked, and what is being done to either put a stop to it or to prosecute those who have, or to bring some kind of closure to this, as this is sensitive information that, as you yourself have admitted, is being leaked?
How we investigate, I can't reveal that information. However, what I can say, the information that I was referring to, that was a Malaysian document, and they did not clarify that that was not a Bahamian document. It's a Malaysian document, and gave the impression that it was a Bahamian document issued from the office of the Prime Minister. That was not the case.
And my second question has to do with the curfew and also with the I guess what police and authorities will be doing to those who are in contravention and who contravene the law. Will happen? Will people be arrested? Are they going to be incarcerated in large numbers? Have we given thought to what's going to happen now when people break the law that's been put in place?
If you break our laws, the law is straightforward. You will be arrested. That answers your question? I'm certain that at 9:05 you will be indoors.
I could be indoors.
Good afternoon, Altavis Mannings from ZNS. Sir, I have 3 questions. First of all, those individuals who had scheduled weddings or funerals, now that the curfew is going to come into effect tomorrow, is there any compensation, or what advice would you give to those individuals?
Compensation from
government, or how can they get compensated for paying already floral arrangements, etc.?
Their wedding can proceed, just that the numbers of personnel would decrease, and I'm certain they would organize that with the hotels. Let me give you an example. We're supposed to have an official handing over for our new commissioner of police. That has been postponed. The handing over will occur, but it'll be a small ceremonial event. But the event that we're accustomed to, that would not occur. There was also scheduled an official police ball that you would have for the commissioner of police. That too has been postponed. However, once this matter has resolved, then we would have our official ceremony as we are accustomed to, and we'll have our official ball for the commissioner of police. But what has been paid already to the hotel, the commissioner of police and his personnel are negotiating with the hotel in terms of refund, because what has happened is beyond their control.
So basically then the people who have already scheduled weddings and funerals just have to wait it out.
You can continue and you can still get married. If you have a date planned, I would advise that you continue with that date, adhere to that date. However, you must now modify the situation.
The CARICOM chairman, Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley, had a press conference today about the cases in Barbados, as well as early this week, St. Lucian Prime Minister Alan Chastanet had tested for coronavirus. Can you tell us can you give us an update on CARICOM's monitoring of COVID-19 in the region?
I think CARICOM, we're all watching. Each particular island is watching the situation, and some are extremely aggressive, others are not. However, each situation is somewhat different. But the bottom line is they're watching, monitoring, and if they feel that they must move to this particular level, then they would move to this level. You would note that Jamaica may have commenced curfew, but they have other issues that they're dealing with. Jamaica may have also commenced other stringent measures earlier, and so it varies with individual country.
My next question, sir, is for the health minister. Any health official, if they can give us an update on the individuals who have the virus and those who are quarantined, any update that happened, any updates for today?
So the situation remains the same. We still have 3 persons confirmed positive, and we are still doing the contact tracing and testing as appropriate, and we await the results a little later on today. So it's the same.
How will this curfew apply to vagrants and homeless individuals living on the streets?
Shelter in place. Wherever it is that they would find shelter during the evenings, they must stay there. It is a sad fact of life that there are far too many, or too many, and one is too many, persons who, for one reason or another, are in that situation. The principle, though, is to shelter in place, not to mix with other persons. Keep yourself socially isolated as much as humanly possible. And I think that is the best answer that I can give at the moment.
Can you clarify or just make certain for some of the people watching that this order in relation to businesses applies to lawyers and people who worked in the consulting sector and those kinds of firms?
Well, any business that caters to the general public, so that the public can just walk in, is a business. If not specifically exempted, that business needs to work from home. Lawyers can be contacted by their phone 24/7. And so if there's a need to represent a particular client who might seek their assistance, then obviously lawyers can be easily reached and can easily go to wherever they need to go to see and serve the interests of their client. Further, the legal profession is one uniquely suited to remote work. Most of the intellectual work behind the law is you have digital legal resources, and it's easy to work from your home computer or laptop. Yes.
Do the law enforcement officers have the necessary resources to help them as they deal with people who potentially could spread the virus to them?
I'm not aware. I think that's something for the medical professionals and those who are a part of the broader struggle to answer.
Hi, good afternoon, all. So I can shed some light on the situation. So what is needed in some cases for people who come in contact with suspected cases or known cases is something that the doctors call personal protective equipment. In regular everyday language, that is gloves, a mask, eye shield, and gown. So there are good guidelines from expert authorities like the World Health Organization in terms of who needs this personal protective equipment. Generally, it's healthcare workers who are coming in close contact with the patient who may be offering care. For example, a nurse who is changing the patient, who may be changing diapers, who may be taking samples, swabbing in the oral cavity, or taking blood tests and samples. For other persons, including people who are at triage on the front line in the hospitals, that is not recommended because all the information would state that if you're not in close contact with the patient, meaning you're not within 1 to 3 feet offering care, you're not highly at risk for infection. And so what we would recommend in that case is standard precautions. So what that means is frequent hand washing. Again, you don't touch your face. You try not to get body fluids on you, and that would suffice. And that's not our opinion. That's expert guidelines.
And just a question for you as well. Yeah, because I'd asked, and I just wanted to go back to it, what exactly would you need to see in order to not recommend an extension of the order? Right now, for instance, we know of 3 confirmed cases, which seems to be quite small. So after the 11 days, is it the case that if there is no more cases, or if there's just a single case, what precisely would influence your thinking on that?
I understand that question because that would be very practical information everybody would want to know. But the answer to that is somewhat long, so if you bear with me, I will explain. So remember, we have a new infection, a new virus of a kind we've never seen in the world before. This happened before, and a wise person, they say, can learn from the experience of others. So Spanish flu, it happened in the early 1900s, and it too was very infectious, and the population had no immunity for this virus. There was a tale of 2 U.S. cities. One did strict regulations the minute they saw a problem. At the first sign of problems, there are things that you should do. The other city did not do anything. They had a parade that was planned for 200,000 people. And you know, these things, sometimes there's benefits. You can raise funds, you can raise awareness. And despite the best infectious disease advice, don't go on with business as usual, they did. The problem with this is there's a paradox in pandemics, especially viruses. You can't see them. Many people will have no symptoms. This thing looks just like the cold and the flu. A few days after that parade, all the hospital beds were full. They could not meet the capacity of the country because the number of doctors, nurses, hospital beds, and ventilators will remain the same. 4,500 people died. In the other city, who followed the best advice? They did social distancing. They stopped gathering. No more than 20 people could gather. There was a curfew in place. There were no mortalities, and everything was fine. And so people may think that this is stringent, but some people will adhere to recommendations. And just like advice, some people will not adhere to good advice. So what we are concerned about is putting in place best practice measures to keep everybody safe. Because in a viral pandemic, things can look fine,
but they really may not be fine. So we're being overly cautious. To answer your question, when will things return to normal? That really depends on certain things. It depends on what is the situation with the disease in country. Do we have a cluster, or unbeknownst to us, was there local transmission, despite the fact that we tested outside of those stringent guidelines? So if the worst case scenario is true, then we will see ongoing transmission. When we get to March 31st, we will have to review and say, okay, what do we do now on March 31st in terms of the situation, because we don't know the future. However, maybe if things are back to the way it should be, we could review. We can only give recommendations to higher level officials to what we think we should do as technical people. But do please keep in mind that you cannot isolate yourself from infection forever, because people have said, why didn't you just shut down earlier and so on? It doesn't actually work, because if you can see that there are 170 countries and just about 19 Caribbean territories with infection, the infection will eventually come to you. And so it's what do you do when you see the first sign of infection? I do hope that answered your question. I know it wasn't an actual date, which is what you wanted to hear. But we will have to see and use our best guidance to keep the population safe.
No, don't go. I have another question. This one has to do with the concerns a lot of people have with children. Children are home. Children, by their very nature, are going to move around and continue to move around. What advice do you give to parents who are having to deal with children as they work from home, as they deal with all of these now, with curfews, et cetera,
Sure.
to try and keep children safe, who may not be getting the disease, but could help to spread?
Good. That's actually very, very good practical information for parents who now have little ones at home. So, as you know, the moment we heard of the first case, that was on a Sunday, there was no school on Monday. Now, that is because children, they're going to touch their face. They're going to share toys, put toys in their mouth. And so we had to reduce the ability for these children to mix and share toys and share saliva and germs. So there was a school curfew. Now the children are at home. And I've heard parents saying, oh, could there be a play date? Maybe we could have people come over. No, we do not recommend it. So first let me start in the home. Have yourselves or your children's caregiver, if your caregiver comes from outside the home, you want to make sure that they first are well and they wash their hands and, change into clean clothes when they get to your house. You want to wash the children's hands frequently with soap and water. That works really well. It works better than hand sanitizer if you use it properly. Now, the children are going to touch their face. You can't stop children from touching their face and putting little snacks in their mouth. But what you want to do is you want to stop them from gathering with other children. So play dates, close family, friends, and so on. Just remember, when you share toys and playtime, you also share the risk of infection. So if you do that, keep in mind that your child's friend might have an infection. We know that 80% of these children are going to do really well or be asymptomatic, so they can spread germs and they can bring it home to grandma or someone who's vulnerable. We also recommend not letting these children go to the playground, because you know what? We can't sanitize all that playground equipment and toys. So they may need to go outside, otherwise they'll be going stir crazy. They can go to the park or the beach, but we want the children to stay within their family unit, and we don't want them to gather at this time. That will help to prevent infection. And in the meanwhile, all those other non-medical things of what you can do to keep them entertained, homeschool and so on.
Take them individually to places, to the park.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Yes, if you have a family with, I couldn't speak outside the curfew. I couldn't contravene that. But medically, if you needed to take your child outside for a walk and there was spacing and you went to the park or the beach and they weren't mixing with other children, I wouldn't really see that the risk would be any higher than having them at home.
Final question. This has to do from me. Prime Minister, you would have mentioned that nurses who have completed the schooling and training will be put into the system. Can you give us a little bit more information about that? Do you have a number?
My understanding is there are a few nurses who had just completed their training, and that may take a while in terms of being hired, regularized, paid, etc. So what I'm saying is that the order gave me as Prime Minister the authority to bypass certain systems and bring them in immediately with salary. Thank you very much. All right.